The day I came home from 18 months in rural Guatemala, my husband Kevin wasn't at the airport. I stood at baggage claim in my dusty field boots, watching other families run toward each other, and I told myself he probably got stuck in traffic. It was a Thursday afternoon. I-95 is always a mess on Thursdays. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother-in-law, Renata. Kevin said you'd be taking a rideshare. Hope the trip home was okay. I read it 3 times. Then I picked up my single duffel bag. I'd learned to pack light after 2 deployments to underserved communities with Doctors Without Borders, and I walked to the Lyft pickup area without saying a word out loud. I had been a trauma nurse for 11 years before I joined the International Aid Program. I'd seen people in shock. I recognized it when I felt it settling into my own chest, that strange calm that comes right before you understand something you don't want to understand. The drive home took 40 minutes. The whole way, I watched the Connecticut suburbs scroll past the window, the Dunkin' Donuts, the CVS, the elementary school where our daughter Lily had her first day of kindergarten 4 years ago. And I tried to talk myself out of what my gut was already telling me. Kevin had been distant on our video calls for the last few months. When I mentioned it, he said the connection was bad. He said he was tired. He said managing everything at home alone was harder than he expected. I believed him. I had chosen to be gone. The least I could do was extend some grace. The house looked the same from the outside. The maple in the front yard had finally grown tall enough to shade the porch the way I always wanted. Kevin's truck was in the driveway. I used my key. The living room was rearranged. That was the first thing I noticed. The couch was against the wrong wall, and there was a throw blanket I didn't recognize draped over the armchair. Small things. The kind of things you tell yourself don't mean anything. Kevin came downstairs with the look of a man who had been rehearsing something and was now forgetting his lines. "You're home early," he said. "My flight landed at 2:15. He knew that. He had known that for 3 weeks. "Not really," I said. He hugged me the way you hug someone you don't want to hug. Arms barely making contact. Weight held back. Lily ran in from the backyard and she launched herself at me like a missile, all knees and elbows, and I held on to her and breathed her in and told myself this was the only thing that mattered right now. My daughter was okay. I was home. Everything else could wait. It waited for exactly 6 days. I want to be honest about those 6 days, because I think they explain something about how a person can miss what's right in front of them when they're too exhausted to see straight. I had lost 12 pounds in Guatemala. I had a parasite that my body was still fighting. I had watched a 7-year-old die of a preventable illness the week before I flew home, and I had not yet found a way to put that down somewhere. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating much. I was functional the way a car with a cracked engine block is functional, technically moving, but not for much longer. Kevin was courteous during those 6 days. He made coffee. He took Lily to school. He asked about my trip in the way you ask about a trip, surface questions that don't require real answers. I kept thinking, we'll get back to normal, we just need time. On day 6, I found a credit card statement in the kitchen drawer I opened looking for a pen. The name on the account was mine, the charges on it were not. $4,200 at a resort in Hilton Head, $800 at a jewelry store in Westport, $100 at a restaurant group I'd never heard of, monthly charges for a streaming service, a gym, a subscription box, all going back 14 months. I had never opened this credit card. I sat down at the kitchen table. I looked at the statement for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and I pulled up our joint bank account, and I found that $23,000 had been transferred out of our savings over the previous 8 months. In increments small enough that no automatic alert was triggered, the kind of increments that require intention. Kevin came home at 6:30. I had the statement and the laptop open on the table in front of me. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen for a moment. Then he said, "I was going to tell you." "Tell me what, exactly?" I said. My voice came out even. 11 years of trauma nursing gives you that. The ability to sound calm when you are not calm at all. He told me about a woman named Christine. He told me it started 10 months ago. He told me it was complicated. He told me he'd been unhappy for a long time, and that my being gone had made things worse. I asked about the credit card. He said he'd opened it in my name to manage expenses. I asked about the $23,000. He said he'd borrowed it, that he intended to pay it back. I looked at him for a long moment. This man I had been with for 9 years, this man I had called every Sunday from a mountainside in western Guatemala, with spotty satellite signal just to hear his voice. This man who had told me, when I said I was afraid the distance would be hard, "Go, I've got everything handled here. Go do what you need to do." I asked him to leave the house that night. He did not leave. He said the house was his too and that I needed to calm down and that we should talk about this like adults. I slept in the guest room with the door locked. In the morning I called a lawyer. Here's what I didn't expect. I expected the legal process to be hard. I expected Kevin to fight over assets. I expected things to be ugly in the way divorces are ugly. Paperwork and mediation and the particular misery of dividing a shared life into boxes. What I didn't expect was my family. My mother, Ruth, had been close to Kevin for most of our marriage. She liked him in the way certain mothers like certain sons-in-law. Completely. And slightly in spite of their own daughter. He was charming. He coached her through setting up her new phone. He remembered her birthday without being prompted. He brought wine to every Sunday dinner. 2 weeks after I asked Kevin to move out. After my lawyer sent the first letters. After my credit card had been opened with a forged signature. After I filed the first police report. Kevin called my mother. I don't know exactly what he told her. I've pieced it together since. He told her I had come back from Guatemala, not myself. He told her I was paranoid and volatile. He told her the $23,000 was money he'd used for household expenses because I had stopped contributing to the family finances, which was not true. My paycheck had been direct deposited into our joint account the entire time I was away. He told her that he had tried to hold things together while I was off saving the world, and that he couldn't take it anymore. He told her the credit card was one we had opened together and that I was confused about the details because of everything I'd been through. My mother called me and said, in a very careful voice, "Sweetheart, I think maybe you should consider talking to someone. A professional. Before this goes any further." I thought she meant a therapist. I said I was already working with someone. "I mean before the divorce," she said. "Before you do something you can't undo." That was when I understood. My brother Paul stopped returning my texts. My sister-in-law, Gwen, who had been my closest friend for 7 years, sent me a single message. "I love you and I hope you get the help you need." Then she went quiet. My Aunt Carol, who had sent me off to Guatemala with a handwritten note about being proud of me, forwarded me an email by accident. She'd meant to send it to my mother. That said, "She's always been dramatic, but this is a new level. Kevin is devastated." I stood in my kitchen, and I read that email, and I thought, I have been gone for 18 months, providing medical care to people who had nothing. I came home to a husband who stole from me, opened a fraudulent credit card in my name, and committed what my lawyer later confirmed was identity theft under Connecticut state law. And the people who love me have decided I am the problem. I did not cry. I'm not sure why. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe the part of me that cries had been used up somewhere else. I made a cup of tea. I fed Lily her dinner. I helped her with her spelling words. I tucked her in and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and listened to her breathe, and I thought, this is enough. This one thing. She is enough. The legal process took 9 months. My lawyer, a woman named Patricia Okafor, who had a voice like cold water and never once raised it, walked me through every step. The forged signature on the credit card application was confirmed by a handwriting analyst. The $23,000 in transfers was traced and documented. Kevin's attorney tried to argue that the transfers were for household expenses and that I had given verbal consent. Patricia produced 14 months of my direct deposit records and said, very quietly, her paycheck covered household expenses. "Can you tell me what the funds were for then?" Kevin's attorney said they'd need more time to review. In the end, Kevin agreed to a settlement that included full repayment of the $23,000, responsibility for the fraudulent credit card debt, and primary residential custody of Lily with me. He did not face criminal charges. The DA declined to prosecute on the identity theft count, which Patricia told me was not uncommon and which I made my peace with. I want to be clear about something. I was not satisfied with the outcome the way people in movies are satisfied. There was no dramatic courtroom moment. There was no scene where Kevin broke down and admitted everything in front of everyone who doubted me. It was paperwork and signatures in a mediator's conference room with bad lighting and a bowl of mints on the table. But there was one moment. My mother had asked to meet me for coffee 3 weeks before the settlement was finalized. She'd been asking for 2 months, and I'd been putting it off. I finally agreed. She came in and sat down and looked at her hands for a moment. She had aged in those months. I noticed that. Then she said, "Patricia sent me the documentation, the handwriting report and the bank records." I said, "Patricia didn't send you anything. I gave her permission to share the documents with you." My mother looked up. "I wanted you to have the same information I had," I said. "I wanted you to see what I saw. Because I thought you deserved the chance to understand." There was a long silence. "I'm sorry," my mother said. Not loudly, not theatrically. Just those two words, in the voice of someone who means them. I don't have a tidy answer for what happened after that. We didn't hug in the coffee shop and cry and become immediately close again. It isn't like that. Trust, once broken in a particular way, doesn't snap back like a rubber band. It reforms slowly in the dark in the way broken bones heals. Not back to the original shape exactly, but sometimes stronger in the new places. My brother Paul called me 6 weeks after the settlement. He said, "I handled this wrong." I said I knew. We stayed on the phone for an hour. It was the longest we'd talked in 2 years. Gwen and I are still finding our way. Some things take longer. Here is what I want to tell you, if you are listening to this and you recognize something in it. The hardest part was not Kevin. I want you to hear that clearly. Kevin's betrayal was enormous and it cost me a great deal, and I am not minimizing it. But I knew what Kevin was by the time I found that credit card statement. The truth of him was on the table in front of me. The hardest part was the phone call from my mother asking me to consider talking to a professional. It was the silence from my brother. It was Gwen's text about getting the help I needed. Because those were the people I had assumed were on the side of the truth. And when they weren't, when they chose the story that was easier, the story told by the person who had stayed, instead of the person who had gone, I had to make a decision about whether I was still willing to trust my own perception of reality. I decided I was. I want to say that more carefully, because I think it's the most important thing I've learned. There will be moments in your life when the people you love most do not believe you. When they choose wrong. When they fail you in the specific way that only people who truly know you can fail you, because they understand exactly where to put the knife. And in those moments, the only thing you can do, the only thing that actually works, is continue to believe yourself, continue to document the truth, continue to move through the process one step at a time, and trust that the truth has a way of surfacing on its own. Not always quickly. Not always dramatically, but it surfaces. I'm writing this from the sunroom of the house I bought 8 months after the divorce was finalized. It's a 3-bedroom cape, with a yard that backs up to a small pond. Lily has the room with the bay window because she said the morning light makes her happy, and I have no argument with that. I'm back at Hartford Hospital now, working the trauma unit 3 nights a week. The rest of my time goes to something I started about a year ago, almost by accident. There's a Veterans Services nonprofit in our county that had been trying to recruit medical volunteers for their peer support program, and a colleague mentioned it to me at a staff meeting, and I went to one orientation session thinking I'd see if it was a fit. That was 14 months ago. I'm now the clinical coordinator for their trauma recovery program. We work with post-9/11 veterans and their families, mostly in the greater Hartford area. The work is hard. It is also the best thing I have ever done professionally, and I include my time in Guatemala in that assessment. There is something about sitting across from a person who has survived something they weren't sure they'd survive, and saying, "I see you, I believe you. I know this is real." That specific act, witnessing, believing, not asking someone to be less than what they are, turns out to be more powerful than almost anything else in medicine. I learned that the hard way. Lily started 4th grade last fall. She is missing a front tooth, and she is obsessed with marine biology, and she has my stubbornness, which I apologize for regularly. She asked me once, about a year after everything happened, why our family looked different from her friends' families. I told her that families come in different shapes, and that sometimes shape changes, and that doesn't mean anything is wrong with it. She thought about this for a moment. Like how water changes shape depending on the cup, she said. I told her exactly like that. She seemed satisfied. She went back to her book about whale migration, and I sat there in the kitchen watching her read, and I thought about how many small moments like this one exist in a life. How easy it is to miss them when you're busy fighting to be believed. How good it feels, finally, to be still enough to see them. I never screamed. I never begged. I never sent the emails I wrote and deleted at 2 a.m. in the guest room of my own house. I just kept going, one document at a time, one day at a time, one cup of tea at a time. It turns out that's enough. It turns out that's actually everything.